Hello and welcome to the Kim Iverson Show. Today, a House Oversight subcommittee held a hearing on unidentified aerial phenomena, also known as UFOs. And during the meeting, 3 former military officials told members of Congress that they believe the government knows much more about UFOs than it's telling the public. In fact, they claim the government is absolutely in possession of unidentified aerial phenomenon, that's UFOs, and that non-human biologics were found at a crash site, aliens. So let's break down who these 3 witnesses are and the meeting. We're going to play some clips for you from this really bombshell hearing and really the implications. What does this mean and why are they doing this? Why is the government suddenly really interested? In fact, some of the members of Congress that left this meeting and some of the people who watched the hearing, they said this was the most bipartisan hearing that they had ever witnessed in Congress. So both Democrats and Republicans are very interested in UFOs. They want to know more. And a big question we Americans should be asking is, why is that? Why are they suddenly so in line with finding out about these UFOs? What is up their sleeve? And isn't it just so timely now that we have Space Force? I mean, thank goodness, right? Thank goodness we're spending billions of dollars on Space Force to protect us from these aliens that have been found for sure. And I want to preface this with, I believe in extraterrestrial life. I mean, I don't have any evidence of it, really, except for what we see. I have to go by what the types of footage, the witnesses and whatnot. To me, it just makes logical sense that we're not alone in the universe. So I'm a person that comes from this with feeling that most likely we are not alone. Most likely there is life on other planets. And I'm not going to rule out the fact that maybe they've come and visited us and they've been here. But I believe that if they mean us harm, if they have the technology to get to Earth, which is something we don't have the technology to get in other places, if they have the technology to get all this way, they have the technology to just blow us to bits. So if they wanted to do us harm, they would have done harm to us by now. So I just want to start off with that. But here we go. Let's talk about the 3 different witnesses who testified today. First, there was David Grush. He's a United States Air Force officer and former intelligence official. He claims that the U.S. federal government maintains a highly secretive UFO retrieval program and possesses multiple UFOs of non-human origin. Because remember, unidentified aerial phenomenon or unidentified flying object just means it's unidentified, doesn't necessarily mean that it's from out of this world. It could be, China's got a secret program and we just haven't ever seen this before and it's unidentified. No, he is saying that the government possesses multiple UFOs of non-human origin, as well as corpses of deceased pilots. Ryan Graves is another person who testified today. He is a former F-18 Navy pilot. He said he witnessed unidentified aerial phenomena while he was stationed at Naval Air Station Oceana in Virginia Beach, Virginia. And according to Graves, upgrades to jet radar systems are why we're now seeing all of these objects being detected. It's because our technology's improved. So people might ask that question, well, why now? Why are we suddenly, that's kind of my big question. Like, why now, right? When we have Space Force and now we're willing to dump billions of dollars into another wing of the military-industrial complex, why now? And he says, well, it's because we've actually upgraded the jet radar systems. And so now we're seeing more of these objects that otherwise would have gone undetected because many of them are supersonic. David Fravor is a former Navy fighter pilot at the USS Nimitz Carrier Strike Group. He is a witness to one of the most credible UFO sightings in history. So if you've heard of the Tic Tac, he's the guy that saw the Tic Tac. And there's even recordings of this, the video evidence of this. So really interesting. So interesting witnesses. So we're going to now play you some clips from today's hearing. Truly a frightening bombshell hearing. And so let's start off with this one here. This is Representative Garcia, and he is from California. He's a Democrat from California. And he's asking whether or not they believe the government is in possession of UFOs. Take a look.
Mr. Grush, finally, do you believe that our government is in possession of UAPs?
Absolutely, based on interviewing over 40 witnesses over 4 years.
And where?
I know the exact locations, and those locations were provided to the Inspector General and some of which to the intelligence committees. I actually had the people with the firsthand knowledge provide a protected disclosure to the Inspector General.
I know the exact locations, he says. I can tell you where the UFOs are, he says. Wow, okay. So this isn't just vague, like, I believe I have evidence, the government has some UFOs, I've heard of this. He's saying, I can tell you where they are. So these are 3 whistleblowers, right? They're coming forward, they're taking risks, and he's saying, I've got hardcore evidence. And in fact, David Grush has the most compelling, I would say, in my viewpoint, the most compelling of the 3 witnesses, because he's like confident. He's got all the information. He can give you lists. He can give you names. He can give you locations. He could tell you all the details. He just couldn't necessarily do it in this hearing. And we're going to hear clips of that. Here is this is Representative Nancy Mace. She is a Republican now from South Carolina. Watch her questioning about biologics, non-human biologics. Do you have the bodies of the aliens? She wants to know. Here it is.
If you believe we have crashed craft, stated earlier, do we have the bodies of the pilots who piloted this craft?
As I've stated publicly already in my News Nation interview, biologics came with some of these recoveries, yeah.
Were they, I guess, human or non-human biologics?
Non-human, and that was the assessment of people with direct knowledge on the program I talked to that are currently still on the program.
And was this documentary evidence, this video, photos, eyewitness? Like, how would that be determined?
The specific documentation I would have to talk to you in a skiff about.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. So, and you may or may not be able to answer my last question, and maybe we get into a skiff at the next hearing that we have, but who in the government, either what agency, sub-agency, what contractors, who should be called into the next hearing about UAPs, either in a public setting or even in a private setting? And you probably can't name names, but what agencies or organizations, contractors, et cetera, do we need to call in to get these questions answered, whether it's about funding, what programs are happening, and what's out there?
I can give you a specific cooperative and hostile witness list of specific individuals that were in those.
And how soon can we get that list?
I'm happy to provide that to you after the hearing.
Super. Thank you. And I yield back.
So again, here's this guy. I know where the UFOs are. I know where the bodies are, and I can give you lists. So I wish they would give us those lists. So now these Congress people are going to be able to get this information in a skiff, which is a highly, it's a room that is for classified information. That it's a very protected room. So like your cell phone can't go in there. They're built in a way so that you can't have people spying, spies can't get to and all of that. So that's what they're talking about. Now, even Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is concerned about this, and she wants to know also some information about, okay, we're hearing the whistleblower testimony. You're saying you know this. You're saying you've seen UFOs. You're saying you've seen UFOs. You're saying you've seen alien bodies. Like, where do we get the evidence, essentially? And that is what her questioning is. Watch this.
For the record, if you were me, where would you look? Titles, programs, departments, regions, if you could just name anything. And I put that as an open question to the 3 of you.
I'd be happy to give you that in a closed environment. I can tell you specifically.
Thank you. Commander Fravor?
And I would say, and I've told people that you have to know where to look. They're not going to divulge it to you because of the classification levels. But if you know where to look and who to talk to, which is exactly what Mr. Grush can point you, then you have them.
Okay. Mr. Graves?
I was an operator, so I was depending on folks like Mr. Grush to do that homework.
Okay. Thank you very much. I yield back to the chair.
Okay, so if they want the information, he can provide it for them, but we're not going to get it in this hearing. So we're just getting all the juicy stuff of, wow, they've got this information, these whistleblowers saying the government has all of this. And then it's up to these members of Congress to then follow up on that and hold meetings in a skiff and get the actual classified information, which it sounds like they're going to end up going and doing, because this is one of those rare hearings where all of the people seem to be on the same side. All the members of Congress just want some information. what we've seen in these past hearings when we've talked about misinformation, disinformation, the weaponization of the government, when we hear hearings, when we watch hearings of COVID pandemic, origins of COVID, what we see is really one-sided. It's usually Republicans that are saying, we want to know more about the lab leak, or we want to know more about government interfering with social media companies to censor Americans. And you've got Democrats saying, you're all a bunch of conspiracy theorists. Interestingly, the one time you would expect Democrats to say, you're a bunch of conspiracy theorists, would be about UFOs and aliens. And instead they're like, tell me more. Tell me more about these aliens. So interesting what's gone on in just American politics at this point. Okay, so more questioning going on here. This is about the sightings of supersonic speed. So these are not just, unidentified foreign objects from a foreign country, from their military development program. These suckers can go supersonic. So here's them explaining that.
Mr. Graves, again, I'd like to know, how do you know that these were not our aircraft?
Some of the behaviors that we saw in a working area, we would see these objects being at 0.0 Mach, that's 0 airspeed, over certain pieces of the ground. So what that means, just like a river, if you throw a bobber in, it's going to float downstream. These objects were staying completely stationary in Category 4 hurricane winds. These same objects would then accelerate to supersonic speeds, 1.1, 1.2 Mach, and they would do so in very erratic and quick behaviors that I don't have an explanation for.
Yeah, so if that's not alien, then there is a country out there who has better technology than we do. Can we think of one that maybe would have that type of technology? Now, according to Dr. Stephen Greer, who's been on this show, and he's one of the foremost experts on UFOs or UAPs, he says that it is actually our government, that this technology has come from aliens, that there were aliens that have come to Earth. They've brought technology with them. They've crashed. We've been able to extract that technology, and we've got shadowy government programs that even members of Congress would not really be able to find out about totally, black ops types programs that are funded. We see $1 trillion disappear from the Pentagon going to these types of programs where they're completely off the books. And that is why we can't account for the cash that gets siphoned out of the Pentagon to these programs. But he says that the technology that these pilots are witnessing is that. It is actually American technology, but it is just extremely under wraps, really shadowy programs, and they're testing, and that's what these pilots are seeing. And that these programs, they do not want that technology out there, because once it's out there, once you use it against another country, for example, then what happens? Just like how they got the technology the first time. The aliens crash, you extract the technology. Well, if we use this technology against foreign countries, then they could, same thing. We could crash, or they could somehow intercept the technology, and then they have it. So that is why Dr. Stephen Greer says we haven't been using this technology. We just have the technology. Not only that, but the implications of the technology. When it's discovered that we have it and people then know about it, this technology can power the Earth, for example. It would change the landscape of how we operate. It would change who makes money, and that is too threatening. And so that is why it remains completely shadowy, completely under wraps, and that's his explanation. So that's important to know that, these pilots are saying, we've never seen this crap before, and it could be alien, it sounds like it is originally alien, but that it's in fact being manufactured by like Lockheed Martins of the world and their shadowy, or Raytheon and their shadowy programs. And that, by the way, was Representative Burchett. He's from Tennessee. He's a Republican. Here he is also asking if anybody has been physically harmed, if any Americans, pilots, anybody's been physically harmed in efforts to cover up extraterrestrial activity. Watch this.
Have you faced any retaliation or reprisals for any of your testimony or anything on these lines?
Yeah, I have to be careful what I say in detail because there is an open whistleblower reprisal investigation on my behalf, and I don't want to compromise that investigation by providing anything that may help provide somebody information. But it was very brutal and very unfortunate, some of the tactics they used to hurt me both professionally and personally, to be quite frank. Yeah.
It's very unfortunate, as they say, when you're over the target, that's when they do the most firing at you. Do you have any personal knowledge of people who have been harmed or injured in efforts to cover up or conceal these extraterrestrial technology?
Yes. Personally.
Have anyone been murdered that you would think, that you know of or have heard of, I guess?
I have to be careful asking that question. I directed people with that knowledge to the appropriate authorities.
Maybe in a, if we could get in a confidential area, SCIF, we could talk about that. But unfortunately, we were denied access to the SCIF, and that's very unfortunate in this scenario.
Well, I don't think it is, actually, because I like that we're seeing this. If this was all held in a SCIF, we wouldn't be able to see any of this. And so I appreciate that we're at least getting some of it. And then maybe they can go behind closed doors and open up the classified documents and be like, here's the pictures of the alien bodies. Okay, here is Representative Garcia again, a Democrat, asking, really talking about his concerns about what he's hearing and how this is a national security concern, but also that there just doesn't seem to be a way for these, well, he says there's no way for there to be these reports, for people to make reports, you know, commercial pilots, fighter pilots to make reports about the UFOs that they've seen. But in reality, people have been reporting this for decades and they just, you know, get demonized as conspiracy theorists. So here he is expressing his concerns.
Particularly, Mr. Graves, one of the, I think, concerns that for members of this committee is this idea that pilots, there's no system to actually report UAPs and the stigma around pilots. And so can you just briefly, you mentioned that you're working with 30 pilots right now that have had encounters with UAPs, but you've also, I believe, discussed and know of many more pilots. This is just those that you're currently working with. Is that correct? Can you expand on that?
Certainly. I'll break that down in two ways. First, when we were first experiencing these objects off the eastern seaboard in the 2014 to 2015 time period, anyone that had upgraded their radar systems were seeing these objects. So there was a large number of my colleagues that were detecting these objects off the eastern seaboard. They were further correlating that information with their other onboard sensors, and many of them also had their own eye sightings as well of these objects. Now, that was our personal firsthand experience at the time. Since then, as I've engaged this topic, others have reached out to me to share their experiences, both on the military side as well as the commercial aviation side. On the military aviation side, veterans that have recently got out have shared their stories and have expressed how the objects we were seeing in 2014, 2015 continued all the way to 2019, 2020, and beyond. And so it became a generational issue for naval aviators on the eastern seaboard. This was something we were briefing to new students. This is something that was included in the notice to airmen to ensure that there was no accidents. And now with commercial aviators, they are reaching out because they're having somewhat similar experiences as our military brothers and sisters, but they do not have any reporting system that they can send us to.
And let me just add, both to Mr. Fravor as well as Mr. Graves, not having this system for reporting, would you both agree that it's harmful to not just our national security interests, but to understand this phenomenon of what's happening with UAPs?
I think it's actually a travesty that we don't have a system to correlate this and actually investigate. You know, so if you took the East Coast, you know, there's coastal radars out there that monitor our air defense identification zone, so out to 200 miles. They can track these, you know, so when you see them, they could actually go and pull that data and get maneuvering. And instead of just having the airplanes, there's other data sources out there. And I've talked to other government officials on this. So you need a centrally located repository that these reports go to. So if you just stuck it in DOD, you wouldn't get anything out of the Intelligence Committee because they have a tendency not to talk. But if you had a central location where these reports would come in, not just military, but also commercial aviation, because there's a lot of that going on, especially if you talk to anyone that flies from here to Hawaii, over the Pacific, they see odd lights. So I think you need to develop something that allows you a central point to collect the data in order to investigate.
Mr. Graves?
I would concur with everything Mr. Fravor said. I'll continue to say that the commercial pilots that have reached out to me through Americans for Safe Aerospace are doing so because they don't feel there's another way for them to report this safety issue.
And I think one of the clear outcomes of this hearing already is that there has to be a safe and transparent reporting process for pilots, both on the commercial side and the military side, to be able to report UAPs in a way that's also transparent, but also understands the scope of our national security interests and what may be classified or not. But I think there has to be some sort of system, and so that's something that I hope can be an outcome that this committee can work on.
Well, I can appreciate that. I can appreciate that they want to put together an actual official reporting system so that you're not just like going to your superior and being like, that's what I saw, something kind of weird, and then you're just labeled as some sort of a crackpot. The thing that's concerning, however, about that is what are they going to do with these? What are they going to do with these reports? And if these are shadowy, like what Dr. Stephen Greer believes, that these are American programs funded by shadowy Pentagon dollars that are disappearing, and that they are just working on this technology, and they're now showcasing this technology almost for what purpose? If you're not going to use it against your foreign enemies, then what is the purpose of doing it? One big purpose that I think many of us are worried about is to just continue growing the military-industrial complex, to continue getting more funds, that this is about justifying Space Force or justifying weaponizing space, growing the military-industrial complex to where they need to start making weapons that are going to protect us from these aliens, that would be their ultimate goal. And that makes a lot of sense if these are actually their programs and they're thinking, well, we could use these programs to scare the living daylights out of people and hold congressional hearings that now Democrats and Republicans take very seriously. And we're going to get billions more dollars for military, continuing to siphon dollars out of the American public and continue to keep us bankrupt and poor and homeless and crazy, and not dealing with all of the things that we need to be dealing with because we're just pumping money into keeping us safe from these clearly hostile aliens who could have blown us to bits by now. So that is, I think, my big concern is that this would just be weaponized to continue weaponizing. And that needs to be reined in on. And I think we need to be thinking logically about, how dangerous are these UFOs? Do we really need to be going in that direction? Because I do believe that's the direction they're going to go in. I want to leave this segment with this clip from Representative Burchett, the Republican from Tennessee, who says, I think, the thing that many of us say, and many of us wish that more members of Congress would say. All of them, please say this in unison. Here it is.
It's been so difficult to get here today. I've said, in the Baptist church, we'd say that the devil's in our way. And the devil has been in our way through this thing. We've run into roadblocks from members, from the intelligence community, the Pentagon. I proposed legislation to go in the FAA reauthorization that just said if an airline pilot has a sighting, that when he makes that report to the FAA, that it would come to Congress. But I was told that the intelligence community did not like that, and the amendment was not even heard in committee. I think it's time for this country to take back our country. We need to tell the folks at the Pentagon, they work for us. Dadgummit, we don't work for them.
They work for us, dadgummit. We don't work for them. And that is what I wish everybody would say in unison about the Pentagon, is that you work for us, dadgummit. You don't... We don't work for you. But it often feels the other way around. All right, I want to tell you about forpatriots.com. It is a company that is dedicated to helping Americans prepare for whatever comes their way, whether it's a natural disaster, another pandemic, or aliens. You never know. Could be a big alien invasion. Even if you just need enough supplies, really, just to get you through harsh summer and harsh winter weather, 4 Patriots has the products that you need. They offer a wide range of survival gear like thermal blankets. They have generators, water filtration kits. They also have many choices in survival food kits that range in size from 72-hour kits to a 1-year supply of food. So if you're worried about this summer's heat, they also have a solar generator that'll help prevent you from enduring those rolling blackouts, and that could be coming. Where I lived last September was hot as hell, and so it's good to prevent those rolling blackouts by getting a generator of your own. They also have great home and garden gear, camping gear. Check it out. Go to 4patriots.com, use the promo code Kim at checkout for 10% off your order.